The pod opened with a strange hiss. A hiss, a crack, a snap, another hiss, and then silence. Silence filled the air as I could hear the mechanics begin to move. Not really hear them, but I could feel the humming of everything under my back. I started to try and open my eyes. I was starting to come back from where I was. I was starting to feel everything around as my nerve endings began to slowly come back to me, slowly come in, and as I reached up slowly, I tried to reach over to find out if I was still me. I wanted to be able to feel me under my fingers, but I didn't have a choice. I felt other paws clawing on me, pulling me forward, shaking me ever so slightly. I could hear words, but I couldn't understand the language. Different words and phrases were being used, but I couldn't figure it out. I slowly was coming back. Oh, why was I having to come back? Why did I have to come back? No, I didn't want to come back. Why? And as I slowly opened my eyes, I looked and I could see images, shapes moving around. Most of them in silhouette and blurry. It was like coming out of REM sleep. But it was exactly like that. But this REM sleep had been multiplied so many times, I was having trouble trying to get any of my neurons to actually fire correctly. I began to close my eyes again, wanting to drift back, but no, something grabbed me and shook me. Something hit me across the head, forcing my head to snap. What the hell was that? I felt pressure, but no pain. I started to open my eyes again, looking, and again silhouettes as they started yelling something at me in some strange language. What was that? Was that Italian, Spanish, Portuguese? No. Was it Japanese, Chinese? No. Vietnamese? No. Russian? Nah. Not Polish either. Maybe it's one of those other... and as I drifted off again, this time something a lot harder, cracked me across the face, forcing my head to snap again, but this time it hurt. I knew I was awake now, and that is when my instincts took in. All my training kicked in. I reached out for the first silhouette, diving out of my pod onto it and onto the ground, holding it by the neck, cracking my hand back and looking at what it was. How? What? Huh? Before this had happened, I was an old man. I was an old man who had survived long enough to see my world be torn apart by the idiots that thought they were in charge. These complete morons decided that they would fix our entire population by causing the population to shrink. These morons thought it was a good idea. The problem is their way of doing it was extremely nefarious, which caused a lot of riots, a lot of countries to start breaking down, and as we all know, human nature will simply make you say, well, if I can't enjoy this planet, no one else will. And that's when missiles started to fly. That's when cruise missiles began to make their path across land and water. That is when things started to get really, really nasty. I had lived long enough to survive what happened. I lived long enough to see the aftermath with my own eyes. I also lived long enough for those who were just smart enough to get everything together, ready for us. They said that we could stay in stasis while the human race healed itself. I worried about this stasis, but we didn't have much of a choice. Food was becoming extremely scarce, and what's the worst that happened? I either die in this pod, or I die of starvation. So I might as well roll the dice and hope I catch double sixes. But what I found was so much different. We were all led down into an area lined with pods on both sides, stacked up to the ceiling. We worried about this. Our belongings were put in one small little area next to the pods, barely big enough for a carry-on. We knew this was all we would have to take with us for however long we were going to be in these pods. And then the long process of preparation. Most people didn't like getting stripped down in front of everyone, but it didn't matter. We didn't care. Most of us were half emaciated anyway. I saw a few ladies actually collapse as they had no strength in their legs and had to be assisted into the pods by those, though wearing medical clothing, could be seen that they did not have much strength in their limbs either. This was a last-ditch effort to save what was left of humanity. Those of us that had passed the bioscanners, those that were able to take the immunotherapies, those of us that would be able to withstand the rigors of what was coming. We had no idea what was waiting for us. We didn't know how long we'd be asleep. We were told maybe a decade or two, just long enough for the earth to come back, to bounce back. It wasn't so bad, it was just bad enough. So we tried it. Many people had already built their own pods in their own basements, but I worried if they would just run out of energy over time and they would just drift off. As soon as I entered the pod, I realized that this would not be the dreamless sleep that they promised. Instead, it was a lucid dream. It was like I entered REM sleep. I realized, since I knew how to manipulate my dreams and make them lucid, that I could control 90% of what happened in them. And then for the next several hundred years, seemingly, I lived several lifetimes. I had several women with me. I had children and grandchildren. I raised and lost my own empire hundreds of times, but it was always me. I always knew I was in this. I was in heaven. I was the main character in this show. I can attest to, maybe it was Nisekai. Maybe I had gone into another world, as I had a beautiful elven wife. And I had several children with her. I had a wonderful job ruling everything. I was the king. I was the end-all be-all. And as I was on my 7th, maybe 8th life there, I realized that I had actually spent true years out there, at least in my own perception. I know that just a few minutes of REM sleep can be several hours, seemingly, to those consciousness. At least that's what's activated. So I wondered how long I'd been asleep, but those thoughts were immediately pushed away by the fact that I would end up starting my life again from a younger age and be able to fix a few other mistakes, and then something else would happen. And I'd get myself this lovely young thing that would be with me for another few decades as we lived our lives again. And this rotation was going on well until I thought I found the absolute perfect life for me. And just as we had had our first child, an absolutely perfect one, suddenly everything started to go blurry. Everything started to rip at me. Everything was like needles in my brain. And then throughout the body, as it ripped at me, it seemed like all the cells in my body were beginning to be torn apart. I looked on in horror as everything I had just worked for the past 10 to 15, sometimes 20 years was disintegrating right in front of me, and there was nothing I could do about it. Nothing at all. As I began to feel myself again, that I could feel myself stuck in this laid down position, just sort of there. And I tried to reach up to see if I could touch my body, to see if there was something else, if I was still me. And then something struck me. Eventually, I came back to reality, and my PTSD kicked in just like it always had. And now I'm holding the neck of a creature, something strange, a red creature with horns that looks scarily human. Yet it's looking at me with fear in its eyes as my hand is cocked back and I'm ready to punch it right square in the face. I can't tell if it's male or female. All I know is the next second I'm kicked in the ribs and I roll over to the side. I look and I'm bleeding. Whatever kicked me actually had some sort of knife or something on his foot. I look over and it was a clawed foot. This foot came up again to try and hit me. I grabbed it, spun it around as fast as I could. I heard bones snap. Maybe it was the joints. I didn't care at that point as I pushed it back away and I saw this blue son of a bitch fall to the ground screaming as it grabbed onto its leg. They started screaming at each other in different languages. I tried to get to my feet, but I'm still staggering around. Lucky that I was able to grab the foot in time as I'm still having trouble figuring out which way is up, down, left, right, or center. Staggering around, I feel drunk. Oh, this must be what they were talking about as lingering effects. As I got to my feet, I fell back down on my ass, shook my head. What the hell? What's going on? I look over and I can hear another man start screaming basically the same thing. I look and the pods are coming into view. My eyes are truly beginning to focus, and some of the pods are being opened. What the hell's going on? I look over and the one I was holding its neck is now trying to console the one that I think I broke its leg. I was like, what's going on? I try to stumble back to my feet, but this time I grab a hold of the railing and pull myself up to my feet. As soon as I get up, I try to get my feet under me, and it takes a few moments. And then I remember what I was instructed back in the day when I used to run a lot. Swing the legs, get a little motion, get the fluid back in the joints again, get the blood moving around inside the muscle. Oh, that's right, kinetic stretching. Here we go, not static stretching. No, get moving. And I started swinging my leg around. I could feel the blood actually going from my torso down my legs and into my knees, down to my feet. Oh, that felt so painful. Oh, dear God. It was like sleeping muscles had finally come into wake. Oh, dear God. I dropped to my ground, just screeching in pain as the other leg started to fill with blood from all the movement, and then my arms started feeling it as well. Oh God, and the pain was radiating up into my neck, up into my head. Oh shit, that hurts. Oh, but I muscled through it, and I looked over. I could see several others on the ground writhing in agony as well as I started flexing my muscles, trying to get everything back running again. And it didn't take more than a minute, but boy, that was one nasty, nasty minute. I looked over, and the one that I had cracked its leg, apparently I hadn't actually broken its leg, but I had twisted its ankle. And that pop I heard, I don't know if it was a pop or a crunch, but he wouldn't be walking straight for a couple of days. I'd be glad I didn't grab something else and break it. Regardless of that, I looked over and I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. These demonish looking things looked kind of human, I guess. The humanoid for sure. But clawed feet, even with a spur on the back where the end of the heel should be. But they kind of seem to walk on their toes. That's odd. Short tails too. Short tails. Only about 2 feet long. That's strange. What the hell is going on? I staggered around a little bit, getting my bearings, as I looked over, and I could see that several other different species were trying to help out humans, but they weren't going to every pod. What the hell was going on? What the ever-loving crap is going on? And then suddenly, everything jerked sideways, and I ended up bouncing off another pod as my hand slipped off the rail from the goo that was still all over my body. I ended up on the pod. I looked over and I wiped the pod away, and I saw that whoever was inside had long since died, as they were nothing but a mummy. I screeched in horror as I didn't know what the hell was going on. I tried to get back to my feet again, and this time The room I was in jerked again sideways, but this time it was more like everything had dropped an extra 2 or 3 feet. And as I landed on the deck, I suddenly realized we are definitely not in Kansas anymore. I could see the ones with horns running up to me, screaming. It was like they were trying to ask me something. I had no idea what the hell they were saying. I realized it was definitely a language. As they were motioning with their hands and nodding their heads sideways, I still didn't understand what was going on. I gave our universal signal of what? Opening my hands and palms up. As in, what the hell are you talking about, lady? What the hell is going on? Suddenly again, everything jolted, but this time it launched me forward and directly into her, cracking my forehead right into one of her horns. Ouch, that did not feel good. I ended up on top of her, and I could see she was a little put back as I was slowly trying to get off top of her, and suddenly realized I still wasn't wearing pants or socks or anything for that matter. I looked over, wiped my eyes a little bit, just quickly, and then I realized I saw my name on the side of where my pod was. Reaching over, I undid the latch and ripped out the bag, still looking pristine the same way I left it. I unzipped it and immediately started putting on my fatigues. What the hell was going on? I don't know what the hell is going on, but I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Finally getting my clothing on, I reached in for another piece of equipment. I put my pistol belt on. One side was my .45, 15-round magazine. The other side had my blades, and it had my extra magazines. Alright, now I can dance. Reaching in, I grabbed my PC and put it on my head, more for just commonplace than anything else. Just, I guess you could say, muscle memory. Who the hell needs a hat when they're inside a building, after all? I ran up to them, and again, I motioned. What? As I asked them, what is going on? That is when I heard something I wasn't sure I actually heard. It was a massive clang of metal. And with that, I turned to them, and before I could say what the hell was that, they both looked with absolute terror in their eyes as they looked at each other. Suddenly, the female grabbed the male, hoisted him up so he wouldn't have as much pressure on his leg, and then motioned for me to follow her. She carried him over. I was like, okay, that's it. I'll carry this guy. I grabbed his arm, put it over my shoulders, and went to hoist him up, and then realized this guy doesn't weigh shit. Oh my God. I looked at him a little bit, and as I reached my hand around his waist just to pick him up, I realized this guy can't weigh 105 pounds soaking wet. I know I was emaciated, but what in the ever-loving crap is going on? As I started running, I realized that the female was getting farther ahead of me, so I simply picked up the male as high as I could and I ran. I yelled over to the rest of them, hurry up, get your shit on, something's going on, I don't know what. Another one yelled, what was that big clang, bang, what's going on? I don't know, get your shit, let's go. I just kept screaming at everybody. Apparently, speaking English to them was enough to get a lot of them to come back to reality, as I could see a few of them reaching up and opening their compartment and grabbing for their own clothing. Not everybody had actually brought a firearm like I had, but everybody in that day and age carried at least a blade. And with that, we followed the female until she stopped dead in an intersection. She turned to the left, and she was facing that way, and it seemed like what she saw scared the living crap out of her. She said something, I don't know what. And as I went to move forward, the male shoved his clawed hand to my chest in a vain attempt to get me to stop, but I wanted to see what was on the other side. And as I turned and looked to see what she was looking at, I saw what can be only called nightmare fuel. Oh God. It's official. Coming out of stasis sucks balls, man.